Welcome to Globally Speaking, a podcast dedicated to unlocking global understanding. Join us as we engage with experts and innovators who are reshaping the way we connect with global audiences. Whether seeking to refine your approach, wanting to expand your understanding of AI and its role in transcending global communication barriers, or just curious about the intricacies of global content, this podcast promises to enlighten and inspire.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our very first video podcast. And I am very pleased to say I'm joined with Tomáš Burkert. Did I pronounce it right?
Yes, that's fine.
Great. Tomas, you and I worked with on TrainAI for about 3-4 years now. Would you please introduce our audience, yourself, your backgrounds, and we'll start our session with that.
All right, thank you, Çetin. So, my name is Tom. I'm a linguist by trade and vocation, but actually, I'm a linguist nerd first, and I'm an AI nerd second. For the past 5-6 years, what we've been really doing in RWS was pivoting from pure localization services to data services, helping big and small clients train their AI models, fine-tune their AI models. And here you can see, especially with the rise of LLMs, where my two nerd sides merge together in a perfect way. So I've been super excited about all of the development in the AI space, following it really closely. And, in the past few months, actually working on the LLM synthetic data generation study.
That's great. So maybe we can say Tom, our AI nerd here. Okay, great. So, Tom, I wanted to start our session with really looking into something that's really relatable to our audience. There are lots of Gen AI capabilities out there, a number of large language models. Even myself, I find myself going to a very specific language model for very specific task. What do you do in your day-to-day activities? What large language models do you actually use, and what purposes? Can you share that with our audience?
Yeah, so it can be really disorienting because there are so many models these days, and they keep, new ones keep coming up. So it can be tough to pick the right one. I actually use multiple models on a daily basis. Not just because I am, it's in my line of work to sort of test them and see what's new and what's good and what's not. But also, as you said, they tend to be good for specific purposes. So for example, when I'm doing some coding work, in Cursor, I can pick almost any model that there is. I usually pick Claude Sonnet because that tends to be the best one for coding. Regardless of what a lot of the benchmarks say, I feel like that's the one that's most helpful to me. And that's, predominantly what users of Cursor, for programmers that use it for AI purposes or for coding purposes, they tend to sort of agree with that sentiment that Claude Sonnet has the best coding capabilities. But then when I'm planning a trip to Amsterdam, I usually go to something like Gemini, because that, to me, gives me the best results. The one that it always listens to what my specific needs are, right? What I like, I tell it, hey, I want to go to museums. I like botanical parks. What should I do? And it will give me a really good plan. And all of these models do. It's to a certain degree, it's partially what your use case is, and partially how it sort of vibes with you, right? How it agrees with what you're expecting from it. So I think people should adopt this mode of operation where you just go out and test things. You don't have to test everything. That would be super exhausting. You should, on a regular basis, sort of test all of the new models, not all of the new models, but the ones that come up and seem to be doing well in benchmarks and on Twitter or wherever you get your AI news. And that way you can figure out for yourself what's good for you, whether it's in your personal life, right? Planning trips to Amsterdam or whatever, or in your line of work, where again, these use cases might be very different. Coding versus traveling is very different.
So Tom, then basically it's evaluating constantly and understanding what really provides as an output. And if you like the output, because I was kind of thinking as you were describing this, why not ChatGPT? Why Gemini? Or why not something else? And I think perhaps the point is, as a knowledge user, you try these prompts and then you see the output and you see if that output really resonates with you. Do you believe that output? Number one, right? Number two is the output is what you really desire from a structural perspective, the details, the outputs that you really desire from that particular prompt. Now, I find myself doing the same thing, but for some reason, I gravitate towards the ChatGPT. Maybe it's the ease of access and ease of use. And I think a lot of consumers' behaviors is depending on where they are and how they are consuming those particular large language models. If we switch over to businesses, obviously, large language models have multiple tasks for consumers for the day-to-day coding, summarizing contents, helping with organizational tasks, but also, like you said, it's just like even personal trips. But if we think about how that needs to be applied to B2B and enterprises, there is still so many large language models out there. How do you suggest enterprises' approaches to that?
I think the best way to approach it is to adopt a sort of benchmarking process, right? As I said, you need to test continuously, and not everything. And you should have your set of use cases and your set of what my business is trying to achieve, right? What are the end goals? And you should build your own mini benchmarks, because as we see with a lot of these benchmarks that are out there, whether it's MMLU or whatever else, there's always too many of them for you to even sort of take it in. They don't always reflect the sort of the real behavior that you'll see from the LLM, right? You might see, this and this model tops the charts for, let's say logical reasoning or logical thinking. But when you actually go in and ask questions that are rooted in real life, and maybe it's not just true reasoning, but there's some grounding element or some instruction adherence, some following how you think about a person and sort of going along with you, that might give you very different results from just like the benchmarks that are really sort of narrowly defined. So I think the future is that businesses need to start doing this work for themselves, and that's part of what we did with the LLM study, where we sort of published the whole methodology of how we went about the testing. We share the prompts, we share the whole thing, so businesses can get inspired by how we did it, and maybe they can create their own benchmarks, their own studies.
Thank you. Could you tell us a bit more, Tom, about the LLM study, that benchmarking study that you recently conducted?
Absolutely. So we ran what we call LLM synthetic data generation study, LLM study for short, because that's a long name. We tested 9 different models in 8 languages and 6 tasks. And we basically wanted to look at how these models perform under different conditions, and especially under sort of different languages or different contexts from a linguistic perspective. Because as you probably know, these models tend to be really strong at English. If you throw a English task at them, they'll probably do fine. But once you start using them in Polish, in Czech, in Tamil, in long tail languages, they actually start struggling quite a bit. And it was also some sort of like internal impetus, because we gravitated towards one specific model that was supposed to be state of the art, and I kept asking myself, are we really using the best one for different languages? Because we have these needs from our clients to generate large amounts of synthetic data for different fine-tuning or training use cases. And we didn't really question which models we use for each language. So it was also an exercise for us to see whether we're really doing the right thing and doing the best for our clients.
So Tom, just to quickly, so large language models, generally they are multilingual. Let's call it generally, right? Because, it depends on the LLM. But even if they are largely multilingual, they have different outputs, and they have different benchmarks based on that specific language. So the methodology that you mentioned here, do you adapt that to each language then?
No, the methodology stays the same. But what we do, and that's one of the unique angles of the study, is that we performed all of the benchmarking using professional linguists, right? Most of the benchmarks tend to be sort of closed problems, answering, A, B, C, D questions, that kind of stuff. And that can be really narrow. And also it could be, companies could potentially even cheat on those benchmarks. So there's a lot of additional thoughts or additional considerations you need to have when you start testing things. What we did was we said, okay, the best arbiters of quality are humans, right? This is supposed to be outputs for humans. So let humans judge the quality of the outputs. And that way, there's no cheating. If the human says, yes, it's good, it's good. If he says, no, this is bad, then it's clearly bad. So this is one of the ways where we sort of stand apart. And yes, using humans actually brings a lot of additional consideration, additional things you need to think about. We actually have 3 separate linguists look at every single sentence that we generated, so that we could eliminate any biases or any sort of issues that we could have with the data. But yeah, this was one of the angles where we were like, we can't just reuse the same test and same kind of methodology that all the others use, because we don't think it makes sense. Humans should be judging AIs, not AIs judging other AIs.
That makes a lot of sense. So that's very interesting. Anything that you can share with our audience in the context of, Tom, that this particular large language model is the best with the linguistic skills? Is there anything that came out of from your study so far?
Yes. The best one overall over all tasks and all languages was Claude Sonnet, which sort of reinforced, as I said, the vibes that people were getting from Claude Sonnet as the best performing one.
Even though Sonnet, right?
Sonnet, yes. However, it highly depends on what you're doing, right? When we looked at certain tasks, certain languages, Claude Sonnet didn't always win. In fact, in some languages, it didn't even end up being in the top 3. So depending on whether you're just generating synthetic data or you're doing translation or text normalization, you might end up picking different models. And within those tasks, you might even end up picking different models for different languages within those. So there's not really one model that would be one model to rule them all. You need to be really specific about what you're testing for, which is why I believe the study results are really insightful, but I think the biggest takeaway for anybody who's interested in implementing AI, implementing LLMs in their products or workflows, is you need to start testing. And this is something that AWS TrainAI can help with. That's what we do for clients, small and big, whether it's fine tuning, training, all of these things. But yeah, you need to get testing. You need to get in there. You can't just trust some benchmarks that the LLM vendors publish, or not necessarily even trust blindly our numbers, right? Because our numbers reflect our specific needs. Your needs might be very different, so you might need to test in a different environment, different use case.
Now, Tom, I'm actually going to ask you another question, because I think my original question was not that great, because it's not about how large language models great in a linguistic perspective, but I think it's about the context as well, right? How you can provide the context to large language models for it to perform the asked task. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into that, providing that prompt, designing the prompt, and providing that context for large language models to either translate or evaluate the translated content?
This is a difficult thing to get right, because LLMs are by design non-deterministic, meaning you ask it the same question 10 times and you might get 10 different results, outputs, right? And they might be generally similar, but the wording might be slightly different, or even sometimes the message itself might be slightly different. So prompt engineering, as it's usually called, like defining the prompts, iterating the prompts, can be must be really iterative, and can be really difficult to know when to stop, right? Because you could be tweaking little things, word here, word there, structuring the prompt really slightly differently, but you don't know where to stop, because it's, as I said, it's difficult to benchmark without actually running like a large-scale study like we did. So with prompt engineering, it's a matter of starting with some best practices, which there's many of, and there's different sort of schools of prompt engineering even, but you start with best practices and you try to iterate at least a little bit on what could be suitable for each model. Each model could respond slightly differently to different prompts, and the prompt itself really is the crux of how the model will perform. It can only do things that you ask it to do, right? Part of what we tested for were specialized tasks, such as text normalization for ASR contexts, where you need to sort of rephrase the sentence in a way that it can be read out loud, right? So instead of the number 9, it would be the word 9. Or if you have an email address, you need to spell it at rws.com. You need to spell out everything. And for this, you need to give it specific instructions as part of the prompt typically. So you need to write all of the rules, what it should do, what it should not do. And this is an iterative process potentially for each of the models. Some models respond to different kinds of prompting. So again, this is something that you need to sort of make part of your sort of strategy, how to approach it, right? Because you need to spend at least some time when you're evaluating different models, sort of trying to meet them where they are a little bit in terms of how they respond to prompts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question, Tom, is going back to the study and the methodology that you use. Can actually clients come to TrainAI and try to really understand which large language models for what purposes they will need to utilize in their businesses? Is that something that they can come and get help from you?
Absolutely, and that's actually something we're doing for quite a few clients. This is not an issue that we made up, right? Businesses are trying to figure out what are the best LLMs for specific tasks, for specific languages, and they have approached us before and are doing it almost constantly, and being like, hey, I have these 3 models that I need to evaluate, or I have my own model and I want to evaluate it against GPT-4o or something else. So that's definitely something we do. It's our bread and butter. And it was actually also one of the motivations why we wanted to publish this study, to sort of go out there and say, hey, this is what we found, this is how you could do it, sort of give a blueprint for how this project could be run, so that clients can trust that we've done this before and we're really capable of doing this.
Thank you, Tom. Anything you can recommend and suggest our customers as a next step for them to get to that point, i.e., do they come to TrainAI with their pain points or what they're trying to achieve, and then you can actually help them and consult them? Or what would you recommend for them to take as a next step in that journey?
We can help our clients at basically any stage of their journey. Of course, the better definition or understanding of their pain points, use cases they have and they bring to us, the better, because then it kickstarts the conversation and shortens the turnaround time for whatever evaluation they're doing. But we are happy to consult. We've done it even with some of our big tech clients, to sort of go back and forth and be like, hey, we think we should really do this slightly differently to get the best results and so on. So we can advise our clients. We can sort of build the methodology for them based on their needs. We're really flexible in this regard.
Great. And last question, Tom. So we talked a lot about large language models. We kind of looked into what's best to address the needs of the businesses and enterprises with adapting AI. What is next for them, you think? There are lots of new things are happening and very fast. What do you think that's trending, that is impactful to our clients, and that is actually going to be really impactful to their businesses?
The biggest trending thing right now is definitely agentic AI. Everybody keeps talking about it, and partially for a good reason. I think there's definitely something in there later down the road where you would have different agents performing different tasks, even talking to each other. There's a lot of like agent-to-agent protocols being created and sort of socialized. So I believe there is something in there. But I think in the nearer term, the focus should be on how you establish what models work for you, using benchmarking or some sort of solid methodology, and also focusing on the multilingual aspect of how you serve your clients, right? Because we've seen that, as I mentioned, for English, it's a no-brainer. LLMs do a really good job of talking to people, summarizing stuff and so on, transcribing images or audio. So that's a really good use case for multiple scenarios. But once you start offering this in your product for global audiences into many more languages, you might start running into issues with the accuracy or the general usefulness of those. So I think, again, benchmarking, measuring how well these models could be used, which ones would you use, maybe you swap some of the models for different ones for specific languages. This is an area that is fairly understudied, and I think businesses should start looking at this, because sooner or later they will have to.
That sounds like, Tom, that's the prerequisites for a lot of that's what you're suggesting, right? That's what I'm hearing, is that should be the prerequisites to our to the businesses before they jump into what I want to call it agentic AI hype, because there is a little bit of a hype happening there right now, right? But what you just said really resonates with me, because without good quality data, without the model performance, you further automating it. And further automation is something that we all should be looking for. We all should be seeking in our businesses. But if the clients are looking to automate without that model fine-tune, without that model is performing the way that they expect, then we're going to have agents doing all kinds of smart things, and they're going to do it very fast, but the output is not going to be what the businesses desire. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be catastrophic in terms of like, oh, this model spits out absolute garbage. It can be small things like your support agent not talking in your sort of talking out of brand, right? Not sort of following your marketing or messaging style guides, all of these things. So there can be things small that will somehow disrupt your reputation or the perception of your brand, but that can be also catastrophic failures where it will just hallucinate when someone needs help, right? So this should be really looked into very carefully when you're rolling it out, to your end users.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom. Anything else you would like to share from your recent LLM benchmarking study?
So I would like to call out two things. One of them is the general principle that has been sort of touted for the past several years, really, is bigger is better, right? We're going to make the biggest model yet, and it's going to perform the best. It seems like the curve is flattening a little bit. And we're not getting the gains from scaling the models with more data, more parameters, and so on. And we've actually seen it in our LLM study with some surprising results, such as the Meta Llama models, the sort of mid-sized one, 70 billion parameter one, sometimes outperformed the 400 billion one in multiple languages and multiple tasks. And it was not by much, but it was statistically significant. So there were actually cases where you might not need or want to go for the biggest and best model. Again, you should test for your use case. You should test multiple models. And the other kind of shocking discovery that we had during as we analyzed the data was the big difference between the tokenizers. Tokenizers being the sort of the connective tissue that sort of translates words, natural language into sort of the internal understanding of how LLMs interpret language, and the efficiency with which you decode individual parts of words is really important, because you typically get billed by tokens. And so the fewer tokens you can encode the sentence in, the fewer tokens you consume, the lower the costs are. And we've seen some huge differences, both on English, which is perhaps the most surprising, with up to 60% of difference in terms of tokenizer efficiency between the best and the worst model. But when you then go to different languages, longer tail languages, particularly using different writing systems, you could see increases of the tokenizer sort of consumption or token consumption to up to 450%. So this can really balloon your bill. So again, this is something you need to take care of, and you need to sort of measure when you're evaluating different models.
So we need to be more efficient and smart.
Absolutely.
About that. And I think to your first point, size does matter, right?
It does, but even the size discussion, more and more models are becoming this mixture of experts sort of architecture, where you have kind of like smaller models, and that they're being selected for different tasks, or routing parts of the inputs into different experts within the model.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter as much as we think it does, but that's what your point is in the context of the performance is the key element in here. And how to measure that performance is something that, of course, you can have some AI capabilities to measure that performance. But I think the key element here, as you're calling it out, Tom, is that humans' judgment is still valuable. It will continue to be valuable for us to measure the performance, for us to gain to that quality aspect of the outputs that models are going to perform, so then we can actually go out and let them automate as much as it needs to be after we understand their performance, we are comfortable with their performance.
Absolutely. And this is also a matter of trust, right? Like alignment of models to human values is really important and will continue to be important, even if we, at some point maybe automate even the evaluation of synthetic data of the natural text. Even then, we will need to make sure that these models are aligned. So there's a lot of promise or like a lot of future need for humans in the loop, because humans, again, will be the consumers of those models, right? So it needs to be aligned to their needs.
Very true. And I think trust is very, very important to us as consumers, but also to the enterprises. Our recent report, Riding the AI Shock Wave, have 3 pillars of trust. I encourage our audience to download the report and have a look at that section. Very good insights around the trust and how organizations and consumers are looking at AI-generated content, how trustworthy and how transparency the consumers are seeking for businesses. I think the AI-generated content is going to be there, and it's already there. As long as the enterprises are transparent and as long as enterprises are upfront about that, I think consumers are acting and behaving better about that. So that trust element is very key. Tom, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having this session with you in Amsterdam. And thank you for our audience listening in.
Thank you too.